You're listening to the Celtic Soul Podcast with me, Andrew Milne. You're all very welcome to episode 21. On the podcast today, we will have the second part of our conversation with Paddy McMenamin. The response to Paddy's story has been very positive. Once again, as we continue to try and bring something a little different and unique from other podcasts you may be listening to. It will be a tale of two games as Celtic return to action this week. Later this weekend, the Celtic players will travel to Dundee for a tough game with Dundee United at Tannadice. The home team will be well up for the game and they will be confident from Kilmarnock's resistant performance and hard work against us at Rugby Park before Ballincolly Gate had our next two games postponed. Fair play to Livy, who done us a favour and took points off the wonderful Stevie G's tribute act during our temporary exile. But first tonight, Celtic take on Reykjavik of Iceland at an empty Celtic Park. The Celtic players will be keen to get back to action and we might get a first look at Albi Ayeti if Lenny goes with two up top. If not, I'm sure we will see him at some stage come off the bench. Qualification to the Champions League can offer Celtic financial riches that no other competition can. With COVID restrictions, progression to the next qualification round of the Champions League will be decided on the night with no return leg. The game is part of your virtual season ticket and will also be shown on Premier Sports. In the first part, I chatted to Paddy McMenamin about Celtic so far this season. Growing up in Belfast, watching Glentoran, his early days of following Celtic, the start of the Troubles in the North, joining the Republican movement, internment and being sentenced to 6 years in prison. We rejoined the conversation in part 2 with Paddy settling into life in Long Kesh. So you're now a prisoner.
See, at that time, at that stage, it was the done thing. He refused to recognise the court. We spoke a few words in Irish, refused to recognise it. They asked the warders, can these guys speak English? Do they understand English? But we reserved the right as well to challenge them. And, you know, they would lie their teeth and they would say anything. And a few things, we just picked through a wee bit of their evidence, maybe that they'd made up like stories. You know, the army fort was a couple of 100 yards down the road from the estate, and that sort of said the scene is ready to fire on the estate and all that, you know. But, you know, I mean, it was nonsensical because we didn't have any rifles with us, you know, but things like that. But anyway, the trial ended. The judge sentenced to 6 years. You know, we said a few words to him and they sort of dragged us out of the court, down beneath the court, and we had to wait then for a few hours, met the parents. You know, it was sad, you know, for my mum and all, you know, Johnny's sister and was there. But then we were transferred back to the Kesh then, you know. And that was it in the case then for the duration, you know, of the sentence, you know.
So that became home for 6 years?
Yeah, it's. I'm tempted to be facetious and say I've been in worse places, but maybe not.
No, you know, from reading and from listening to interviews, it was a military prison. It seemed to be very organised. Language was important. Education was important.
Yeah, I mean, these were the years like automatically Billy McKee had led a hunger strike in 1972, and it was part of the ceasefire deal that to give the prisoners political status, although they called it special category. They couldn't stomach actually saying political status. And the loyalists got it as well, even though they weren't involved, and the officials, and then eventually the NLA. So everybody had political status. So if you were one of the groups involved in the conflict, you come into the prison, the warders even asked you, what group do you belong to? And that's the cage you went to. So the cages were divided. Obviously, most of them were provisional cages. The officials had one cage because they'd went on ceasefire. The UVF and the UDA had, I think, 3 cages. After 1974, the NLA would have a cage. So, you know, it was 22 cages. I mean, the camp was about, I'm not sure I read somewhere the size of it, but it was like the size of a small town, you know. It was old Nissan World War II RAF huts. And so that we were in the old ones at first. And it was just barbed wire everywhere around the cages, then around the perimeter, and a perimeter fence. There was watchtowers like you would see in concentration camps, you know, in Germany during the war. The warders, you know, it was like night and day compared to the time the boys were in the H blocks leading up to the hunger strikes. It was horrific. We had control inside. We had an elected committee and an OC. Nobody talked to the warders. They didn't even come into the cages at times. They walked round it. They would come to the gate. The OC would go over whatever it was he wanted to talk about, or he would go to them if there was something we were looking. And we had complete control. We wore our own clothes. We organised ourselves. Every morning we were drilling in the yard for an hour. Then there'd be lectures on history, Irish history, European history. There's two things Republicans do, have done since the Fenians probably, that when you go to jail, the first thing you're obliged to try and escape and explore any avenue where you can see a weakness to try and get out of the place. And the second thing is education, and Republicans have always done it. The Loyalists, some were okay, some did, but the Loyalists didn't have our background. They had nothing to fall back on. This had never happened to them before. And they were all running about. They were like Johnny Adair lookalikes, skinheads, the tattoos. They were muscle bound. They were doing dope. They didn't go in for the educational side of it. Now, some did. I got to know one guy, Plum Smith. He died a couple of years ago. He was a UVF guy. He was a shop steward in Harlan Wolf. And he was chairman, actually, of the Northern Ireland Supporters Club in '82 when they went to, I seen him on TV when they went to the World Cup. Interesting guy, not your normal sort of, he was interesting, and I used to talk to him. We were both learning Irish, and we had a Gaeltacht hut, about 16 of us, and it was total immersion, like French Quebec or something. It was total, if you only knew one word, you used it. If you were fluent, you used it. And he was learning Irish in the UVF cage. And I must have got talking, I can't remember, I must have got talking to him through this, our shared thing in the language. And me and him would meet every day, walking around the yard across the wire. And we would chat, about what's happening outside, and we'd chat, and more than us having no time, for Free State politicians, as we called them then, and or for John Hume even, God rest him, and yes, Jerry Fitt especially. Plum had no time for Paisley and the Unionist leadership. He saw through them. He was a working class socialist, which there is a tradition on the Shankill of, going back over the years, But that would be going on. The language classes, or lectures, there'd be would make up dummy weapons, and there'd be weapons lectures, the history lectures, and the Loyalists went in more for the more military, because they were coming from maybe a British Army background. They would used to call themselves SOR and all this nonsense, Republicans is a more casual sort of thing. We wouldn't be into that sort of stuff anyway, So it was more, even though it was military organised, it would still be more focused on education, trying to work out why the hell we were in there in the first place, trying to understand what was happening, trying to understand where we were going in the future.
Sorry, Paddy, you had access to books, obviously.
We had people on the outside, like support groups, and Sinn Féin really was, it was only a small group then. It was more a support group, but they would send in. So we had well stocked. I mean, I've always been a reader, and so I love reading, like anywhere, no matter what cohort of people. Most people actually don't read that much. But we would get books sent in by the thousand, and we'd have our library, we'd have one sort of hut, we'd call it the library hut and canteen maybe. And we would have everything from James Connolly to Marx to Chairman Mao, Castro, every struggle, Algeria, Cuba, Portugal, Algeria, we were reading all this stuff and sort of and getting educated. To be honest, it's where I really got my education. I started up with we had a Cage newspaper. I learned to type, would you believe, on an old black typewriter. And I wasn't some guys were brilliant, and they made the harps that everybody's seen. And that wasn't my. I used to make handbags and wallets and stuff. And we priests used to send us in material to homemade these sort of rugs and stuff, and we'd send them out, and we'd send out some to raise money for outside for the prisoners or whatever, but we'd then send some to our relatives. But I learned to type, and we had a wee newspaper, a wee news sheet in each cage, and then we'd have an overall one, and And it would be politics, it would be history, and I would get, and I became the editor of it, and you would get guys to write, anybody who was interested, and they would write a page about what maybe current affairs, maybe a wee bit of history. There might be then a wee bit of sport in it, like about maybe of table tennis competitions or a bit of football out in the yard, different things like that. Bit of sport, maybe quizzes, an Irish language page. And I actually have, I sent out about a dozen of them before we burnt the place. And I have them to this day, like 40 years later. And the university here in Galway were interested in taking them and putting them in the special, what are they called? Special reading room for young students to be able to access them, So I've been talking to, considering that I've went from Belfast to Donegal, to Galway, and they were in a box in the attic, I suppose, and they survived, and they're in actually a very good nick.
And Paddy, you mentioned football there out in the yard.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're a football fan. Celtic, by then Celtic had become your team. Did you get newspapers for match reports?
Yeah. The papers would come in. I mean, the problem in the cages, even though we had the run of it the whole time, they only ended special category in March 76. So we had it the whole time, and with the running off the place, but also every so often there'd be a riot, and they would stop the papers for a month, or they'd stop visits, or so that would interrupt. Even I was doing A-level English and 74 before we burnt the place, and of course then there was we had our own education system, but then the establishments they would send in teachers, and so I was doing A-level English, but then we burnt the place, and there was nothing for a year, like it's sort of punishment. But
and what happened after? What happened after the fire? Where were you?
Just before we had access. We had the television. Now, like everywhere else in Ireland, you'd never see Celtic. Where it was in the 70s, and the only games I remember seeing was the semi-final against Atletico Madrid in 74 when they were reduced to 8 men, and we drew 0 each at Parkhead, and they beat us 2-0 away in Madrid, and they threatened to shoot Jimmy Johnson's was the big story of the time. Jenky was terrified, apparently, the boys said afterwards, some of the players. But I remember seeing that, and then you would see wee clips of cup finals. And I seen the 72 semi-final. I was still interned against when Dixie Dean blasted over the bar. I seen that during internment.
It's amazing, Paddy, with all that was going on. You can remember Dixie Dean.
Yeah, and I actually remember the day I was listening on radio the day we won the 9 in a row. I just forget, but it was on. It mightn't have been on live on the radio, but I remember it coming on anyway. And they were talking about Celtic during the 9 in a row, and listening on the radio on the cages. I actually don't recall seeing. Well, there wouldn't have been any other Celtic games on in Ireland at the time, But we were up to date. We were kept up to speed with what was happening, After the burn, the burning was as a story on its own. It would nearly take your whole podcast, but we had been protesting all year. We used to throw the food over the wire. We refused the food. We did get our families were sending food parcels. We lived on that. We refused visits. It was all about conditions, whatever, in the camp. The loyalists worked with us. Gusty Spence, the famous leader, and Jimmy Craig, a UDA leader, they're both dead. They agreed to work with us, and they hung up a banner in their cage with a green hand clasped with a red hand, and the legend, the slogan, "United we stand, divided we fall." It was brilliant. And they says, "We'll support you if you go to..." The extreme was to burn it. The Screws thought they would call our bluff. The UDA, the N got, and UVF got word from outside. The guys inside were more enlightened, I suppose. The UDA outside were still sectarian bigots. They told them to back off. People outside are getting annoyed because they're fraternizing with Republicans too much. But Gusty Spence and Jimmy Craig told us, "We'll support you. We won't burn our cages, but we'll give you any logistical support." This night, on 15th of October, 74, there was a row in Cage 13. We'd warned them, if you send the army in again, we'll burn the place. They tried to call our bluff. They sent the army in. We used to have guys done a semaphore, it's the flags, like a military system where you can send messages with these 2 crossed flags. So we would have 2 guys, They climbed up on top of the hut, sent the message up. We were at the top end of the camp. They sent the message to burn it, and it went round every cage. And we gathered the 80 of us in the middle of each cage, and a few men went into each hut, and everybody had a box of matches and did their stuff. Within minutes it was in flames. We give the screws, the warders, we give them a free passage. And we were also told, Billy McKee was the OC, and the camp said nobody was to try and escape because the Brits were still up on top of the watchtowers, and they were afraid that, they would kill a load of us if we attempted to escape. I always think, again, as hindsight, in 83, 38 of the guys went out the front gate. There was 2,000 of us rioting that night. I mean, what they could have done with 2,000. And if we had put on the Screws uniforms, as they did in 83, they wouldn't have known who was a Screw and who wasn't. But anyway, we burnt the place down that night. We camped out. There was a big football pitch in the centre of the camp. The place was burnt down, burnt to the ground. The Brits stayed away, but they surrounded the camp. And at 7 a.m, we had small transistors that were smuggled in. And on the radio, it says everything's under control in Long Kesh, and all the prisoners are back in their cells. And there we were in complete control of the camp. It's still another 3 hours. The next thing, we seen a gate busting open and a couple of Saracens come flying in. And it's actually on film. The Brits put up one of the big things, what do you call them? The raises up in the air. They were filming from there. They filmed the whole thing. It went on for 6 hours from 10 a.m. to 4 in the afternoon. I mean, there was one stage I remember thinking, this is surreal. And we fought them hand to hand because we weren't street kids. And I remember meeting a Brit face to face, and he was terrified, more frightened than we were. And we fought them hand to hand. They were firing gas, plastic and rubber bullets. Hughie Dorn, another friend of mine, was lost an eye, and Hughie died in the last couple of years. We caught a couple of Brits in the middle of the field. It was ebbing and flowing, and some of our boys wanted to do them. But some of the head guys says, boys, we can't. They'll kill 20 of us, they'll shoot us. So we let the 2 guys go. Ironically, when they had us after the riot ended and they had us lined up against us, I sent you some photos earlier on. I came across today. They had us lined against the wire. Apparently, the 2 boys that we had saved were doing a lot of the kicking afterwards, That's how they thanked the boys, But so the guy eventually got it settled. Gusty Spence negotiated with one of our leaders. They divided us on the pitches, and they came in firing the gas, and some of the guys got horrendous beatings. And we were moved back to the top, still red. But Gusty says, it's futile, guys. They're going to kill somebody. So they says, if you go back to your cages, there was nothing left in the cages. So we went back to our own cages. The Brits came in, started handing out beatings, and just left us there. And we thought, Christ, they'll move us to another jail. Or the loyalists said, there's talk they're going to put you in the Maidstone or send you to jails in England. They actually left us. They actually let us live in our own shit, to use a phrase. We had to cobble together bits of corrugated iron and stones and make wee tin huts. And that's how we lived for the next 6 weeks while they refurbished some of the cages at the lower end of the camp.
Paddy, did you serve all your 6 years in the cages?
Yeah. So I was in cage 18 most of the time. After the burning, when they started moving us, as each cage was completed, we moved down to cage 10 and finished up in cage 10.
You came out then after 6 years.
Yeah. Well, I got 6 years, but with remission, it was a bit less,
A bit less. You've come out, there's a life after prison. I know you were married, you had a family. Was it an emotional return to see Celtic? Freedom,
Yeah, Mary, my partner, saying, his first love.
She shouldn't be listening.
Yeah, she wasn't listening, but it sounded so interesting. She said she'd come in and planted herself. Well, first of all, I came out, which was emotional in itself. As I walked out, I promised myself I'll never be in jail again. You might think I had a death wish along with other people. For the next year, we probably tried our best to get back in again. Not at our own, but just the way things were, and it was crazy. And but with a wee bit of luck, a wee bit of maybe more experience, we survived. But it was coming close. To be honest, when you join, you're told there's only really the future. It's you're not going to get a career and a pension out of this. Jail or death is usually the end solution. And as the end of '77, it was probably becoming something like that. We had the paras and the Marine Commandos in, and things were a bit crazy. And I'd met I don't know how to describe her because anyway, Mary's waving her hand at me here. I'd met my future wife. She actually was in Armagh jail at the same time, along with Maria Farrell and others. And she got out a few months after me. And, we were building a relationship. And maybe it was an eye to that. Maybe, I was worried, if you get lifted again, then it's not going to be 6 years because they had doubled and trebled the sentences after they brought in the end of political status, but they also brought in 50% remission as a sweetener. They were hoping the provost would accept it. So there was a 50% remission, but they doubled the sentences. So you were getting 10 years or when you were getting 5 previously, or you were getting 20 instead of 10. And my mum said to me one day, which moved me, and she was crying and she knew I was involved again. And she said, I'll be dead when you come out again if you get lifted. And I felt it, it was, it was a moving moment,
It sounds very emotional, Paddy.
Yeah, it was. And we just, anyway, we headed for Donegal. There was a lot of our friends been lifted, around the same time. And it seemed a sort of a safe bet. And some went to Dublin, some went to Bundoran, I had the connection, outside Letterkenny. So, that was an obvious route to go. My ex-wife followed me down. In hindsight, it wasn't a great idea. But anyway, we got married in Donegal. A lot of guys who were on the run all landed. It was a great day, My sister, who was the girl paper at Bobby Sands' funeral, she was in a paid band. We invited 6 of them, but 20 of them landed from Belfast. And the break during the music, they all got up on stage and they started rattling out all the stuff, all the rebel stuff. And the guy who owned the hotel, John Lilly, was an English guy who'd been buying up property. A gas man, but he had a bouncer, Hugo Dugan, who I played football with. And he phoned Hugo. Hugo told me later, John Lilly phoned him. He said, Hugo, get down here to fuck. The place is full of effing provosts. So anyway, we got married and, and the kids came along. I was still close to things, but, maybe removed a step. And then the hunger strikes came along and it was a difficult time, for everybody, we got through the hunger strikes. I was chairman of the local committee. I was nearly tempted to, go back to the old ways in a sense, but whatever, I didn't. And things moved on. And the following year, my Celtic life started all over again after 11 years. I went over to Glasgow, still a wee bit worried in case they would pull me in, so it was, you just didn't know. But they were playing Real Sociedad in the European Cup. And if I recall, they beat us 2-1 out there, and I think scored first at home. Murdo McLeod scored 2, I think, to win the actual match. But in the M days, I think, up till Martin O'Neill, I think generally we got beat in the first round in Europe every year. I mean, it was desperate,
Does that bring back some kind of, the troubles are still on, but getting out of Ireland and over to Glasgow, did it bring back some kind of normalisation into your, was it an outlet away from politics and war?
Yeah, it was, you're living in Donegal, even though it's only 20 miles into Derry, it might as well be a different world, never mind living in RD or living in Galway, And to be honest, most Donegal people didn't want to know more than most people in the Republic. At that stage, it got war weary, and unless you were Republican or Republican-minded, the movement were like lepers really during the 80s. It was a very difficult time, I remember I worked in Letterkenny in a car factory. there might have been 3 people, as there was, 3 volunteers killed in Strabane one night. And I went into work the next morning and we're sitting around the table at the tea break. And the boys were talking about how did Man United get on last night, or maybe there was a by-election in Donegal, or maybe the price of paint had went up. Nobody would even mention that the 3 guys killed by the army in Strabane. That's the way it was right through them 10 years.
And did you feel isolated by that?
I didn't feel isolated. I didn't. Most of the guys in work wouldn't have knew. Where I lived in Termon, it's a wee small area outside Letterkenny where my mum came from. My granddad was the blacksmith. Most people in Termon would have knew, and most people had no problem, They would have all knew I had been in Long Kesh. There was never any problem, Termon's, most of the vote would have been Fianna Fáil or the Blaney's at the time, and now it's mostly Sinn Féin, So it would have been a sort of, I suppose, certain levels of Republican thinking,
Yeah.
But I mean, it was, but you didn't talk about it much. But again, there was moments like when the boys escaped in '83, and one day about 100 soldiers and 20 branchmen. I was at work and they landed at our house, and she opened the door and says, "We're going to search your house in case any of these escapees is here," And she had she's been from Belfast. She says, "Have you got a warrant?" And one of the branchmen says, "Oh, we've got one of these." They went away and got a warrant, came back, raided the house. She said, she says to them, like, "Where do you think we're going to put them? With 3 kids, Anyway, and then when they kidnapped Don Tidy and he was held famously in the forest in Glentoran, they raided again, and it was so funny. My wife and our neighbour and our friend were up at the post office, it was a few hundred yards away, and they were coming back, and there was about 30 Irish Army wagons parked, and apparently the 2 women says, "Jesus, what is the army doing here?" And they came back to our house, and they were all in our house. And another argument, she says, "What's going on here?" She says, the special branch guy, and special branch guys in the 80s weren't the nicest. I mean, I know loads of guards who played golf with them, and played football, and some great guys. Special branch guys, especially the political police, weren't nice guys, And he says, "We're looking for Don Teddy," and again, she says, "Where the F do you think I was going to put him in this wee house, And so a few things like that. And we neighbour, and he was a mad Celtic man, he's dead as well, died of cancer at 49, wee Pat. He was some party, and he came over that night for a cup of coffee, and he says, "You had visitors today?" And I says, "Yeah, no." He says, "I'm just wondering, why did they not raid my house?" I says, "Oh, for fuck's sake, Pat." So we had a few instances like that, but I mean, Eamon Doherty's dead, and he was involved with me in underage football coaching, and I called him Eamon, and Eamon was a cousin of Martin McGuinness, and he called into our house actually the first month we were down. He'd just been promoted sergeant, and he called in and on a social call, and it was so funny. And he says, and he told us he was related to Martin McGuinness. He said, "Doesn't mean I support anything like that, but I understand more so than most country guards." He says, "Keep your nose clean and you'll have no problem." And, we got on great, and we're involved in the football. And I went to him after the Don Teddy episode, and I said to him, "We're not involved in anything. It upset the kids, guys with guns in the house." And he says, "Paddy, it won't happen again. I'll contact headquarters." And he says they just have a list, and they're just going through the motion of going the people on the list to raid the house. He says they know fine rightly he's not in your house, but so I think it did. It never happened again. So he was, but he was a nice guy. He helped me out a few times actually, and he was a good guy.
Now, Paddy, can I take you away from Ireland and back to Glasgow? It's absolutely fascinating to chat. I think the listeners are going to love listening to your story, because it's a story that needs to be told. So you went back following Celtic then after 11 years, and there's been so many ups and downs in all those years, and we haven't the time to go through everything.
I know.
But if you could pick out 1 or 2 moments, Paddy, following Celtic since then, what would be the high points?
Well, the one, and I know you have a special interest in, because I noticed in one of the fanzines, and you said if you could go back in time, the Centenary Cup final, you would love to be there. I think, did I read that one time?
Yeah, that was when I was just starting to, I was 16, I was starting to take an interest in Celtic.
four of us. My cousin had come back. He was an engineer in Norway. He'd come back. He got good tickets in the main stand, and we shared the main stand with the Iron Maiden, Margaret Thatcher. She wasn't that far away from us, and there was times during the 90 minutes, I felt like nearly running at her, But anyway, we went over. There was a strike in Stenalane. We nearly didn't get over, but we got over anyway at 7 a.m. Dan McLaughlin and Frank McGettigan with me. Dan's brother was Brian McLaughlin, who he made his debut at 16 in 74 and took Jinky's place. He only played 7 games and a big ignorant fullback with Clyde, I think, done his cruciate. And in the 7 games, he played twice against Rangers. And his family have a wee pub near my uncle's pub in near Carrygart in Donegal. And I met Brian, and he actually played one Summer Cup. He'd been playing in Australia, and he came back and he played with us. Summer Cups was a big thing in Donegal, and you would get professional players playing under an assumed name. And Brian and I played with him one day, and I was chatting to him, and I says, "What was it like coming out against Rangers?" He says, "Paddy, I thought my heart was going to burst." That's what it meant to him, And unfortunately, Brian died a few years ago. He had an accident along the Clyde, and he was only 50, But Dan, his brother, was with us, Frank, and Pat, the wee Scottish guy. We dropped them off. I went to my aunt's, dropped Pat at his sister's in Partick. We had a bit of a doze, went to Hampden, and it was brilliant. The trade unions, it had actually been on TV the night before about it, that Thatcher was going to present the cup. And it says, I remember ITV saying, and the Celtic support are Irish Republicans and how they're going to react. And the trade unions in Scotland printed red cards and gave everybody one going in. And they didn't bring Thatcher, even after everything, they couldn't bring her out to meet the teams. The match started and Thatcher was brought into the main stand after about 5 minutes to try and avoid any unseemly behaviour, as they would describe it. But people seen her, even the suits in the main stand seen her. And the next thing, the red cards went up and it just spread around the whole stadium. The Dundee United fans and the Celtic fans and the main stand. And everybody started singing, "Maggie, Maggie, get the fuck," around the whole stadium. I think you can hear it on TV, on the video of it. And they held up the red cards, and the booed her and booed her. And I remember Roy Aiken talking about it later. Like he didn't know what to make of it. He cleaned it, it shows you on TV. As he went to get the cup off her, he cleaned his hands. And he said, "I didn't really know what I was doing when I met her, But anyway, it was a great game. Kevin Gallagher, nephew of the great Patsy Gallagher from Ramelton near us in Donegal, scored the first goal. It was like that to the last 10 minutes. Anton Rogan from Andytown had his best game probably in the hoops, and he got ridiculed a lot, but he was a real Celt, and he was determined. He made an odd mistake, but he was a brilliant guy, and he floated one over, and McAvaney nodded in, and then I think it was the last minute, Joe Miller into Billy Stark and on to McAvaney, and he blasted it in, and sure the place was it was pandemonium. It was brilliant, yeah.
Well, we're on Celtic, and as a former Republican prisoner and a Celtic fan, where do you stand on the debate of rebel songs and ballads being sung at Celtic Park?
I differentiate, and it's an ongoing debate, and there's a bit of ignorance. First of all, I hate sectarianism. I got it out of my system. I always say to people, it might have been in my DNA, as it is in everybody's who grows up in Belfast. That's just the way it is. When I was in the Kesh, I got it out of my system. When I came out of the Kesh, I used to tell younger Republicans, it's not right. We don't do this. We don't kill people because of their religion. We don't attack them. And I got it out of my system. I absolutely abhor it. One of the things that I found abhorrent at Parkhead, hearing people sing in St. Patrick's Fenian Band and absolute nonsense and garbage. I wrote to the Celtic View one time about it. It's disgusting. It's sectarian bigotry at its worst. And we don't have anywhere like a majority like the Bears do, but we do have people who have sectarianism within their makeup. It's unfortunate that Glasgow is more or less another Belfast, and it's there in their DNA. Generally, Celtic supporters, it's just not our stuff. And in recent years, we've nearly stopped all that. To me, singing rebel songs is a different thing, and the English don't even get it. I mean, they're not even rebel. They're Irish folk songs. I mean, we're singing about we're singing about Easter week. We're singing about 1798. We're singing about the Fenians. These are all historical songs about our history, about history against colonialism. We're not singing about, about killing people, or we're singing about resistance to British rule. And that's, to me, is what these songs are about. The Celtic family is, I know it's a mixture. You have, obviously, the Irish diaspora, you have the Scots-Irish, you have people who are strictly Scottish, I suppose. Some people don't like that sort of stuff. I'm sure, as you go higher up the stratas in society, maybe the well-heeled people on the board and the suits maybe find this stuff a bit difficult. I mean, to me, singing The Fields of Athenry or Grace, which is absolutely wonderful, and I love to hear it been sung at Parkhead. I mean, I'm sure we've all noticed there tends to be the boys in the Green Brigade, and what I mean, they're kids and they're great, and they bring a vibrancy to Parkhead which wasn't there for years. And they'll start off songs. You'll hear them sometimes, Athenry or whatever. And I get a sense around the stadium that a lot of the stadium are not inclined to join in. I find that at times, and whether it's because Celtic themselves have put the hammer on it, and I read I've wrote a piece for Joseph Bradley, produces the Celtic Minded books. He's in the 4th or the 5th's coming out, I think, at Christmas. I think I should have a piece in that. And I read a piece, the girl singer, what do you call her, used to sing all the Celtic, Patricia Ferns, and she wrote an article in one of the previous ones, and she said she didn't mind people criticising her and people disagreed, but when Celtic told her, and when she went to Parkhead, they give her a list, you're not allowed to sing these songs or you'll never sing here again. And on the list was, Boys of the Old Brigade, Rifles the IRA, whatever, And she says, when I read this, I was disgusted,
Yeah.
And she had to tone it down a bit, But and I find that, I mean, maybe in the modern corporate era, like when I talk to people, like, I mean, like, you know yourself, no point me preaching to you or anybody listening here. We all know Celtic's not just a football club, I mean, I couldn't imagine 60,000 people going to watch football in the Scottish SPL. I mean, to Hamilton and Ross County. I mean, I find it hard to watch. I mean, there must be a reason why 60,000 people go. And it's the bigger picture. It's the Irish diaspora. It's the whole Irish connection. It's Michael David bringing the sword over it. It's Walford and it's the famine. And that's what makes Celtic, and that's what makes it different. And singing the songs is all part of the culture, And do you remember going back before Fergus, McCann, and back, do you remember the guys were running the show? And do you remember they were really trying to dilute the Irishness of the club? Do you remember? I think there was even a talk, maybe they would take down the tricolour, flying over the North Stand, and there was a wee period when we were getting worried about it.
I think that was other clubs because Bob Kelly said he'd rather play Gaelic on the pitch than take the flag down.
That's right.
I think even the powers that be at Hibs at that time were looking for the flag to be taken down. Paddy, there's a beautiful ballad you said there, Grace, and I love to hear it be sung as well. And but what I don't like is when I hear stupid add-ons into it, because this is a beautiful song and it doesn't need add-ons, and that's kind of, and that's where people can argue against songs when there's add-ons in.
Oh yeah,
because
it's the same. I mean, and you hear, I can't think just off the top of my head, but there's different songs, and you'll get people throwing in Sinn Féin or IRA, and it's not needed, and it's not needed. It's not needed in sort of non-Celtic company, especially.
Yeah,
you don't want to offend anybody, and it's the songs in their own right are beautiful, and if you had the time, Mary could give you a great version of Grace, but for another day.
So we're moving back from the North Stand in Glasgow, and we're back now. We're back now in the 6 counties.
Okay,
so we've had the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah,
we've had peace. We have a new Belfast where you grew up, a cosmopolitan city. The next step then for many Republicans would see the end of the struggle in a border poll and the United Ireland. Is that the end game for everybody? Or is it realistic?
I think it's realistic, but it's not going to be easy. It's, obviously, unity is the end game, but what form of unity is what has to be worked at? What form of government has to be worked at? What form of accommodation? Loyalists have to be part of the New Ireland, Unionists. And, we have to work with these people. The sectarianism still in Belfast, and we see it at the bonfires, and we see, that's there. And, I wouldn't like to be, I know it won't be a Garda, but it'll be a new police force and all that stuff. But, to be a guy from Mayo patrolling along the Shankill or even over East Belfast near the Oval where we used to go, I'm sure he would find it wouldn't be that easy. But all them things are going to be talked through, same as it has been since the Good Friday Agreement. And there's incredible things happening in Belfast since the agreement. And especially in working class areas, and you have ex-IRA people and ex-UVF people and UDA working together. And the reason that there's no riots generally on the streets isn't because of the PSNI. It's because ex-prisoners on both sides have greater credibility within the communities, and they just tell the kids, just back off. And, and that's what's happening. And a lot of that is going on in interface areas, and it's working well, And if something happens, apparently they contact each other by phone, and they'll get a few from each side of the fence, and trying to defuse the situation. So all them things are ongoing. And we've come to the situation. When I lived in Belfast, it was 60-40 Unionist. City Hall wasn't our City Hall. We didn't go into town. You couldn't go into town with a GAA jersey on, you'd be killed, or a Celtic jersey. Now Belfast is 51% nationalist, more so nearly 51% Republican, because Sinn Féin dominate the politics in Belfast. So we have a majority in Belfast now. I think at the last election, it was sort of like 52 to 48% towards unionism. Within the next 20 years, that's bound to work out at least 50-50. All right, they say 50% plus one. It's not going to be that simple. But now I think it's the time, and I think some intelligent unionists realise that, it is only a matter of time till there's a majority of nationalism that can vote the North, or the 6 counties out of the UK. And maybe it's time to sit down and work things out, as they were doing over Brexit. Some people, and some of the farmers in the North, and they realised, their lot would be better in with the Republic. And even Ireland at times seems to be seems sometimes to be a bit interested in developing things, But all that's in the future, we just have to wait and see. At least, we can be glad that there's nobody been killed, that my grandchildren will never have to live through anything like we did in the 70s. That people are having a different life in Belfast. And it's not that it's easy-ozy. Living in West Belfast, well, things have improved and there's no soldiers. It's still an urban working class area, like parts of Dublin. And ironically, it has all the problems that you get there, and whereas during the conflict, we were able to control it, and there was no druggies, or, there was no, you never, there was no antisocial behaviour, or if there were, the hoods, as they called them, would be punished and all that, but that's all finished. And now drugs are rampant in Belfast, as they are everywhere. And, you hear stories of old women, of rape, of breaking into houses in the middle of the day, of stuff happening that never happened. Like during the conflict, our communities were so together, everybody knew each other. I suppose it's a big city. It's, 500,000 people. It has the problems that any big city anywhere in the world will have, And it's just, I've talked to a few people and they said it's a little, after everything people went through in the conflict and everything they suffered, to have some of the stuff that's happening at the moment, is just unfortunate,
It's a huge problem in society.
Yeah.
Paddy, another question I wanted to ask you. We spoke there about the songs. Should we as Celtic fans be also debating, there's a section of our support and that openly call people orange bastards. Now, I do have a problem with that because I don't want to be called a Fenian bastard by a Rangers fan or a Hearts fan or a bastard of any type. But I find it, I suppose, disturbing that we have an anti-racist, anti-sectarian, left-wing agenda among a lot of the fan groups. Well, not everyone, because, we're a broad church. But then when I hear the same people uttering the words orange bastard, I go, why are we not debating this? Why are we not as Celtic fans turning around, and saying, shut the fuck up?
Yeah. I mean, essentially it's ignorance, Andrew. It's deep-rooted sectarian bigotry. We have to face up that it is on both sides. Generally not, obviously, more so comes from the other side, but that doesn't excuse anybody. I mean, anybody who refers to somebody as an orange bee or a Fenian bee as a bigot, he should be called out. As Celtic supporters, we should be calling them out. Again, how we do it, it's, I remember reading a few years ago when there was the debate about Lenny, and like this bank manager, I think it was, and he wrote into the paper something that, he says it doesn't mean anything. He says, my best golf partner is a Fenian bastard. He says, I call him that every day. And he made a joke of it. And he says, I don't even think I said it. It's so ingrained in his mind. The same as people would refer maybe to somebody's weight, or somebody's whatever. He called him a Fenian bee, and he said he wasn't even thinking of it. This guy was a bank manager in Glasgow, and that, I think that's part of the problem, that people say it, nearly don't even think about it. I mean, I've even told people in Donegal and here, essentially, the Republic's not supposed to have bigotry. But I mean, it is there. I know the Protestant population has gone down a lot since partition. But I mean, sometimes if you scrape people, and there was a lot of Protestant farmers lived where I live in Donegal, and I've heard people using that expression, that Protestant bee. It was just an expression, really. Probably they didn't even, but they actually said it. And I think and that probably happens in Glasgow and happens in Belfast. They nearly say it without thinking. It's just ingrained in society, and there's a sectarianism, an undercurrent in the Republic that it is there, not very strong, I must say, and you'd rarely ever hear it, But how we eradicate it is, I'm not sure. You need to educate people, it's, Celtics, in one sense, have done a good job in cutting down some of the songs, but maybe they need to make a major campaign and say, this is totally unacceptable. That's not the type of people we are. Any sectarian expression, and if you lose your season ticket, if you're identified,
To show something, or to sing someone is an orange bastard, and then to sing a historical Republican song, to me, it just doesn't sit together.
Of course. But also people, as you know, and I've had a few arguments over the years with Celtic guys in Letterkenny, but whereas they might sing the songs and express the slogans, the percentage of them that actually are Republicans or were involved in Republicans, I'm not sure what percentage you're talking about, but it might be small in the overall thing, and I think that's where you get, I honestly don't think you get it so much from people with a Republican background using them expressions, but I do think you get it from people who are just Catholic bigots. And no harm to anybody. And we do have a percentage of them, I honestly think it comes down to ignorance. I just know from my own experience, you have to work to get it out of your system. I'm sure I've used them sentiments when I was a 16-year-old. You have to work to get it out of your system. It's wrong. It should never happen, and it's the thing that annoys me the most, especially down here, because they're all Man U and Liverpool supporters here. There's always a good Celtic cohort and a Celtic pub in every town, but most of them watch the EPL. And I've had people say to me, never mind like the standard of the SPL they're always giving out about and how Celtic couldn't survive in England. But they'll also say that's sectarian shit. We don't like it,
Yeah.
And, and we need to do our bit to make sure that it's seen that it's not us, whatever about the other crowd,
Yeah, we need to be progressive and lead the way. Paddy, how do you just mentioned there about the football? How do you see the season playing out? We've had a bad start. We've dropped 2 points to Kilmarnock. We've had 2 games postponed because of the Ballingolly incident. We're playing catch up. How do you see the season playing out? Do you see the 10 being delivered?
Yeah, I think we will. I hope we will, obviously. I'm a bit concerned. As I said before, I remember the 9 in a row and how we ran out of steam the next year. I was at Parkhead that day against St Johnson when they run out of steam for their 10 in a row. And I mean, I know everybody's going in thinking, yeah, this is a doddle. We're going to do the 10 in a row. I don't think, honestly, it's going to be that. I think it's going to go to the wire, maybe. I think Rangers have got stronger. We could be 10 points behind by the time we play the next, or 11 points behind by the time we play the next league game. That'll take a bit of catching up by the time that we play the games in hand. We could probably be level at New Year. We can't expect the same thing to happen 3 times in a row, the way the Bears imploded the last 2 seasons after New Year, and it could be a battle. In one sense, it's sort of, I welcome it because I hate seeing Celtic win the league by 20 points, or even Man City, as I love to throw to the English supporting cohort. But I mean, you like to see a competition, and I'd love to see it going to the wire as long as we come out on top.
Well, Paddy, I don't think my heart could take it.
Yeah, you don't want to be going to the last match of the season, and
no, definitely not, Paddy. Definitely not. You wouldn't do that before hard.
I think we're probably good enough, to hold them off. It's going to depend on the signings. We've made a couple now. Hopefully, we get Shane Duffy in. It'll bolster the defence. It'll be a boost, for us. And depending on who they sign, I don't think the caliber of player they're getting maybe matches. Although the games they played against us, I mean, they looked really equal on the field last season, Hopefully it works out well. And I remember 98, and we were up in the Garngad for a party afterwards, and they had a street party, and there was 10,000 there, and it was incredible, And I don't know whether you know the Garngad. I'm sure you do.
I do, yeah. Michael, one of our columnists, Michael's from the Garngad.
My ex-wife's sister married a wee guy, Kevin Hillick, and he's from the Garngad. And after I met him, then in the 90s, after we split up, and they stayed friendly with me, we would go and stay in his house, which was only 5 minutes from Parkhead. So for 10 years, until people started staying in hotels in the city centre, I would have stayed up around the Garngad on different nights,
Couple of good nights.
There was a few nights, and in them big tall tower blocks they had. I remember a guy had a big mad Alsatian. Oh, Jesus. And there was a wee Celtic club, the Huddle, and I know the owner. He was a friend of Kevin, my brother-in-law, and I'd brought over a few guys from work, first time ever, and we were in the club, and one of these mad Scotch guys started putting out a butt on his tongue. What sort of mad place is this we're in,
Paddy, before we wrap up, can you just tell the listeners a little about your own podcast and the columns that you write and who you write for?
Yeah, I mean, it's kept me busy during the lockdown. I suppose, well, I had always an interest in writing. I loved writing, and from the wee Cage papers back in the day. Then I took early redundancy after 20 years in 03. Did a year in computers, went back to NUA Galway, did a BA in history and English, did a PGDE in teacher training, became a secondary teacher, did a master's in history because I was teaching history, and then became a poacher turned gamekeeper. Isn't that the right, or is it the other way around? But anyway, I ended up working with the state commission, marking the leaving cert and junior cert, and invigilating at them. And so I got into, and I was always writing, and in the college and stuff. And one of my first, we laugh about it, one of my first lectures, I threw her back the first assignment, and she threw it back at me, and she says, "Do you think you're an effing writer?" We joke about it since. She says, "None of that flowery stuff." She said, "Just give me back what I want." and work the system. That's the way university works. So anyway, I started writing a couple of years ago. We have a local paper, the Chicago Tribune, and sadly, my grandson Oisin, he was 20. Me and Mary brought him to Seville in 2003. I had no ticket for the match, but we slept outside the stadium that night. I walked in and strolled in when the Porto fans were coming out, and ended up in the director's lounge with Brian Wilson and Jack McGinn, and had a few glasses of wine with him. Just chanced my arm. We Oisin lost his life about 5 years ago next month, and I wrote a piece about it and about it wasn't the way for young people. It's so prevalent nowadays, and I just appeal to young people. This isn't the way. Life can't be that bad. And the editor, John Mack, contacted me and he says, would you like to write a weekly thing for our paper? So about 3 years ago, I started writing. I write a weekly article, about 2,000 words. I'm open. I can write anything, history, football. I've wrote different bits about Celtic. I can write about golf, current affairs, anything. I wrote about John Hume last week. And I've been doing that. And then I decided I'm okay on IT stuff and all. And if not, Mary can help me out. And, so I started the blog. And I started off by putting all the articles onto the blog. And then I did a podcast during lockdown, just passing the time and putting stuff onto the podcast, that I'd written, and it was only really a bit of fun. I wasn't going to take it too serious, But, it was great. It was therapeutic. As you know, the last year since my surgery, I started writing a book. Again, Mary encouraged me for years. She says, put it down on paper. I eventually got round to it when I was recovering, recuperating. And I scribbled up 135,000 words. It's about the Long Kesh years. It's about Belfast. It's about Donegal. It's about life. And it's about a lot of guys who have died over the years that I knew. And it's a sort of a tribute to them, probably. And we Oisin. And that was very good. It's with the publishers now. We're going to probably bring it out before Christmas, and we'll see how it goes. It's titled. Well, the working title is "Armed Struggle to Academia," and it's there's a few. I had to cut it a wee bit, and there's 5 writers reading it at the moment, and make a few adjustments, and we'll see how it goes. As I said, it was very therapeutic. I enjoyed it, brought back a lot of stuff, but it was good to do it. I mean, it's there for my kids, it's there for Mary, it's there for my kids, it's there for my grandkids, We never really over the years talked much about it to our kids. Actually, my grandkids, were more, even we Oisin, I always remember, go into the shower for half an hour and I would give out to him, you're putting up your mommy's heating bill, my daughter. And all I would hear coming out of the shower was, come out, you black and tans. And I thought, I should pick this up somewhere. And my oldest granddaughter now, she's 19. She was sitting me the night we beat Barca. I didn't get over for some reason. And she was watching the match. Maybe Oisin actually lost interest in football. But when Celtic scored the 2 goals, of course, I let her to roar. And she jumped up and all. And before that, I think I seen her wearing an odd Man United top. She's had the hoops on ever since that night we beat Barca 2-1, so it's...
Well, Paddy, hopefully yourself, your granddaughter, your son, you can all go back to Celtic Park when it's safe to do so, and we can enjoy a wee drink. And Paddy, I'd love to have you at one of the live shows. And when the book comes out, we'll definitely do something with you when the book comes out, because I can't wait to read it, because we've only touched on your life.
If you play your cards right, you might get a complimentary copy.
Oh, signed, I hope. But Paddy, I think this is going to be a 2-parter, because we just had to let the tape run, because the conversation just flowed. It's fascinating.
It was great. To tell you the truth, I was a wee bit nervous. I mean, I've never done anything, and I could feel a wee bit of butterflies in the stomach, but maybe that's adrenaline and it's no harm. And
Paddy, what you've been through. Paddy, it's as I said, it's been a pleasure to chat. I got to know you through your writing for the magazine before I met you, but some of the articles you wrote, I kind of knew you before I met you physically, and then we've enjoyed a pint in Glasgow, but we've never really sat down and had a proper conversation till today. So I thank you for that. I look forward to reading your column in the next magazine. It's the podcast has took over now, and I'm under pressure to get the first of the season out. We were lucky enough to get two during the lockdown, but I'm back working on it this week. And once again, Paddy, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story with the Celtic Soul listeners.
It's no problem, Andrew. I enjoyed every minute. I just want to give a wee shout out. I have two good friends in Glasgow. Jerry Morton lives out in, it's gone out of my head. He lives a wee bit out of town anyway, but he was a Garn Gad man originally. And I go to the matches. I stay with him when I'm over. Big Danny, whose mother was from Term, and went to school with my mother. And I meet Big Danny. He's about 6'5". He's a great Celtic man. And we meet up. And I just want to give a big shout out to the two of them. They're great guys, you know.
Well, thanks for getting them to listen as well. That's another two listeners we have, Paddy.
And also, sorry, before you go, the guy from Norway contacted me.
Big Harold.
Harold contacted me, emailed me. And he printed one of the articles in his fanzine over in Norway.
That's correct, Jay. He sent me over a copy.
And he just emailed me there last month, or last week, was it? I must get back to him, you know. But
he's a super guy, Big Harold. He was the first person ever to write a letter to the fanzine back in 2001.
The Celtic family.
As I said, Paddy, what a pleasure. And we'll talk to you soon.
No problem. All the best, Andrew.
A fascinating story. Thanks to Paddy for being so honest and for telling us his story in his own words. I'm sure Paddy will be back on the podcast when his book is published, and I look forward to chatting to him again at one of our live shows. If you're enjoying the podcast, you can support us by visiting CelticFanzine.com, where you can donate for the price of a pint. You can also support us by becoming a member for as little as $7.99. Subscribe to More Than 90 Minutes for as little as $5.99, or you can buy some merchandise for as little as £5. We promise no unwanted Google adverts on our website or articles, and no unwanted advert interruptions on our podcast. We're keeping it real, we're keeping it independent. Your support will help us to continue to produce quality independent fan journalism, podcasts, video content, and free live Celtic fan events. If you are not in a position to financially support us at this time, don't worry, we will still deliver the same quality content to all fans free. Don't forget to subscribe or follow on your preferred podcast host. Apple, Acast, Spotify, we're on them all, so you never miss an episode. All podcasts are also on our website by visiting CelticFanzine.com/podcasts/. Please follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And if your business or Celtic Supporters Club would like to sponsor an episode, we would be very grateful. Just drop us an email to info@CelticFanzine.com. As always, thanks to Ronan McQuillan, our producer, and to you for listening to the show. We will be back on Friday when the original Holy Goalie, John Fallon, will be joining us as we celebrate his 80th birthday and his Celtic life. From standing on the slopes of Celtic Park, supporting his team, to playing at the highest level for the Hoops in our greatest ever era. Enjoy the match tonight, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll be back here on Friday. Keep the faith and stay safe.